think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Hey folks, you're listening to the best of Conduit News Radio with me, Paul Harrell.
I want to introduce you to an author we have on the line. His name is Doug Weed, author of the book Inside Trump's White House, The Real Story of His Presidency. Doug, how are you this morning?
Hey, I'm doing great, Paul. Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. Now, did I hear that the president tweeted about this book, telling everybody to go get it?
He did. He tweeted 3 times.
Yeah,
so I was
he
very
tweeted,
humbled by that.
Great writer and historian Doug Weed has written a true, not fake news account of what's going on in Washington and the White House. His new book, Inside Trump's White House, is an incredible description of a very exciting and successful time in our country's history. Buy it. That's the President of the United States. So Doug, tell us, did you have inside access to write this book?
Oh, yes, I did. It was amazing. It took about a year or so before they decided to let me in. And, you know, they'd been burned so many times by writers with these fake stories fueled anonymously. And so after about a year, they said, okay, come in. The president just opened the door. You can have anything you want. You can talk to anybody you want. So I started with the family. I did talk to the hostages. I talked to many variety of people, but I started with his family and with he himself and the family, and I just couldn't get out of the family. It was just too fascinating and interesting. But I did speak to some foreign ministers and Chief of Staff Mulvaney and some White House staff, but mostly the Trumps.
Wow. I mean, I bet that is, I bet this book is incredible. Now, it was available November 26th, so, I mean, it's just out. I'm sure it would make a great Christmas present for folks. And you can find it on Amazon. We're actually, for the video audience, we're showing the Amazon page right now, Doug, to them. So, is it historic? I mean, is the Trump presidency? I mean, I know it's historic, but is he really changing things? I mean, I think he is, but what do you think?
Yeah, I think he's been the most impactful president since FDR. There's no question about it. You judge presidents on about 120 different criteria, but the economy dominates, and war and peace, and intelligence and communications. Communications, he's transformational with the digital media. We'll never go back from that. Every president will use it. In terms of intelligence, Donald Trump saw what every great economist in the world did not see. They were unanimous. And he turned around this economy. He proved them wrong. And he's the first president in 40 years not to have started a hot war somewhere. He hasn't invaded anybody. We always invade, you know, Panama or Grenada or Bosnia or Libya or somewhere. He hasn't done that so far. We still may have a war with Iran. And the big one is the economy. I mean, Jimmy Carter's one of the most intelligent presidents we've ever had, but he's rated poorly because of the economy. So is George W. Bush, great warrior president. So what he has done to the economy is everything that every social engineer, Hubert Humphrey, LBJ, any of those people ever dreamed of for the poorest of the poor in America has come true under Donald Trump.
Wow. That's incredible. So the lofty ideals, you know, the reason we had this program or that program. I mean, if you look at the unemployment rate. I mean, you look at what's going on with minority populations, black unemployment, the lowest it's ever been. I mean, to your point, Doug, that it is historic.
It is historic, and think of this: there's 7 million unfilled jobs. That's the population of the state of Indiana. That's how vibrant this economy is, and all the other world's economies are suffering while we're just exploding. That's not an accident. That's not luck, and that's how you measure greatness. The gold standard for a president is peace and prosperity, and that's what we have. It's a shame that we have to lose it to understand and appreciate how valuable it is.
Well, and I know a lot of people have been saying for a long time, hey, we need a president that's a businessman. I think what we have here is a certain type of businessman because, his business is dependent on a thriving middle class. He was in the service industry. And so, I think that's the real reason we're seeing such, economic boom here is because he knows that we have to have a thriving middle class in order to go to some of these places and consume,
Yeah, boy, you've read my book. It's true from day one. That's the difference on everything. Take, for example, the hostages. He was horrified when he learned that this was America's shameful secret, that all these Americans were being held hostage around the world, and it had been kept silent by Republican and Democrat presidencies for 16 years with good intentions. The idea is if it becomes highly publicized, it increases the value of the hostage. More hostages will be taken. It'll be harder to get them free. That was the rationale. But the government bullied news media. You can't report about this. They bullied the families. If you try to get your loved one home on your own, we won't help you anymore. And they didn't keep them informed. And when Trump got in there, he was just horrified. But as you point out, Trump, the businessman, he said, I'll get him back. I'll get him back. He started to squeeze those countries. Erdogan made fun of him. Erdogan of Turkey took a tour of his country, gave speeches mocking Trump. He'd never let Andrew Brunson go home, the American pastor who was held hostage. And Trump took him right off the cliff. Trump just grabbed him and said, let's go, let's jump, here we go. And he practically destroyed the Turkish economy. And Erdogan said, you can have it, go, get out of here. We don't want you. You can take the hostage home. So that's, as you point out, that's a businessman. He sees things that the politicians couldn't see, and he's doing that in foreign policy. He's doing it everywhere.
We're talking with Doug Weed. He's the author of the book Inside Trump's White House, The Real Story of His Presidency. It's recommended by the president to read. What does never complains and never explains mean?
Well, you see in his personality and Trump's personality, and I interview him a lot in the book, and he's very funny, by the way. I guess you know that. But that was a famous quote of Disraeli, the Prime Minister of England. A lot of people compare Trump to Andrew Jackson, and they compare him to Disraeli, who was actually Jewish, had no constituency whatsoever, but became a popular Prime Minister of Britain based on results, based on numbers, what he produced. So that's why some comparing Trump to Disraeli. But that was his famous quote, never explain, never complain, never explain. And it hurts Trump. It's, in my opinion, it's one of his strengths, but one of his weaknesses. So when things go sour and the media starts says, oh, you lied, you said this, but then you said this, so that's a lie. He won't explain it. He won't get out there and say, well, that's because when I said this, I didn't know that. And he doesn't explain. He just goes on. And that leaves him vulnerable. But it also has been one of his strengths. He doesn't look back. He just keeps plowing ahead forward.
Hey, that's interesting. Yeah, because I have explained for him on this program. You know what I mean? Like when they say this, but I've never actually asked myself. I wonder why he's not more. Why doesn't he go out there and explain much? And I think part of the reason is, Doug, and you tell me if I'm wrong here. For forever, the media is essentially the DJ. They set the beat, right? And you got to dance. So if the media's outraged, they're almost like clergy, right? They can condemn you or absolve you. It's an ever-rotating scale. But the president, maybe he doesn't explain because he just refuses to let them set the beat. He's going to dance to his own beat.
Well, that's part of it, and part of it, of course, is the media is owned by the big monopolies that he's breaking up, and this is the story that's untold. But we have in this country huge monopolies. They're created by regulation. So they pass all these regulations. They partner with special interest groups, so the special interest groups just love them, and they promote this special interest, whatever it may be. Often it's a good thing. And they get these regulations passed, and that keeps you from starting a company to compete with the monopoly. And then after they've got their monopoly loaded with regulations, a Republican's elected or a Democrat's elected, there's a recession, and it doesn't matter which party, they pass what they call the stimulus bill. The last stimulus bill is 1,000 pages, the size of the Bible, and it's filled with deregulation. So basically they go to these companies and say, oh, we're in a recession, you have to help us write this stimulus bill. What would help you create jobs? So all the regulations that keep you from starting a business are now, these big monopolies are exempted from them under the stimulus bill, so they can hire people and grow. And it's a racket, and then it's multinational. Their owners are half European, and they own the media, and they own the companies that sponsor the media, and they don't want it disrupted. So here comes Donald Trump. He's deregulating. He's busting all these regulations so that small businesses can come back and compete. Boeing used to be the only competitor on some of these bids. Now 40 other companies are competing with Boeing, and they don't like it. So the media hates him. He's stealing their game. He's messing up their game. He's breaking the dishes.
Wow. That is certainly news here this morning. I mean, to quantify that is really, really interesting to me. Once again, folks, we're talking with Doug Weed, the new book. It's out now, Inside Trump's White House. You should check it out. Now, I understand, Doug, you just said, you interviewed the president many times. You interviewed Chief of Staff Mulvaney, Jared, and Ivanka. What's Donald Trump Jr. like, though? You interviewed him as well.
Yes, he's so much fun. He's no holds barred. He's a Donald Trump himself. It's so interesting to me that the family, most families, there's a smart one and a dumb one and a sloppy one and a neat one and a poor one and a rich one. But these Trumps, every single one of them are dynamic personalities, and Don is certainly that too. He's no holds barred. And Eric and Tiffany, what a hoot! I'm the only person who's interviewed Tiffany since her father became president. She's just filled. She has the funniest stories. They need to go to Buckingham Palace for that big dinner. They've all got their gowns on and their tuxedos on, and they can't get a motorcade, and they can't get there. So they rent a van, the kind that takes you to your Avis rental car at the airport. And they all pile in to Trump, and they say, take us to Buckingham Palace.
That's fantastic. Well, Doug, hey, I really appreciate you coming on the program, spending some time with us this morning, and best of luck to you. Thank you for coming on, and I just want to encourage everybody to go out and get your book.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate that very much.
All righty. Nice to meet you, sir. Appreciate it.
Are you tired of having... Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want to support the work we're doing right here at Conduit News, bringing you the truth, then why not consider giving less money to the government that never stops overspending and overtaxing us by giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce, the premier organization in Arkansas that never stops promoting small business and limited government. Just go to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Support Our Cause. From there, you can decide if you want to donate monthly or one time. Give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow and grow less, and give the people fighting for your values more. Conduitforcommerce.org.
As we speak, Beijing is employing a whole-of-government approach, using political,
Bob
economic...
Maloney here from ASA News, The Parrot. Breaking news from the Capitol in Little Rock. Over now to our new on-site reporter, Susan Shenanigans. Susan?
Thanks, Bob. The governor has just announced that a blue ribbon task force is to be formed.
Today, I'm asking your support for a blue ribbon legislative task force to be created and directed to recommend further reform.
Now we go live to the chamber to listen in for more information on the task force.
I hereby call this session into order. First on the agenda for today is the formation of the Blue Ribbon Task Force. Is there anyone who would like to give their thoughts on the task force?
Yes, as someone who's deeply conservative, why is the governor choosing the color blue for this task force? Sounds like he's really a Democrat loyalist. Why not a red ribbon to prove he's a true conservative?
Well, I represent Walmart, and we agree with the color of the task force ribbon. The color blue is best consistent with the Walmart brand.
I object to this choice. Blue is the wrong color ribbon for this task force.
Well, who are you?
I am Mr. P.C. Wrights, and I represent Target, and we want the ribbon to be red, not blue.
Hold it right there. This seems like a tough decision. Why not ask the governor to call a special session at a later date for an important decision as this?
I think this is something worth talking about. I motion that we decide the color of the ribbon today.
I second it. Fine. We can decide it now. Does anyone have any other suggestions for the color of the ribbon?
I think the color should be white.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Hold on. Definitely not white.
I agree with Mr. P.C. Wrights. Maybe we should choose green for the farmers.
You like the color green because you are a farmer. I think it should be purple, so we can display how Arkansas is an extremely moderate state.
Why are we even discussing this? Shouldn't we be talking about tax reform instead of wasting time with this?
Well, the people have spoken. They believe this is worth talking about, so we are deciding this now.
Excuse me, sir, but shouldn't the color of the ribbon be rainbow to include all types of people?
Please, silence your phones.
I just received a call from Walmart HQ, and they agree with, what was your name again? My name is Fabulous. They agree with Fabulous that the color should be rainbow.
Target concurs with the decision of it being rainbow-colored ribbon.
Is there a motion to make the ribbon rainbow-colored?
I motion to make the color rainbow.
I second the motion. The motion carries because I said so.
The committee will now vote and not be on record to keep the people in the dark. Back to you, Bob.
Thank you, Susan. And thank you for listening to ASA News, The Parrot. Next up, there are reports of a gorilla on top of the Capitol Dome demanding massive sums of taxpayer cash. His name? Medicaid expansion.
PHP Parody. Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Hey folks, you're listening to the best of Conduit News Radio with me, Paul Harrell.
Welcome back to... Oh, let's see, we got my microphone back there. Okay, so we had Black Friday and we had Cyber Monday, actually, was yesterday. I tried to look for some numbers on that this morning. I really couldn't find numbers on Cyber Monday. I do know there's some numbers about what happened on Black Friday. Here to talk more about the economic implications, we have a professor of finance from Stockton University in New Jersey. Dr. Michael Bustler's back with us. Michael, how are you, sir?
Good morning, Paul. How are you? Thanks for having me. It's always my pleasure to be here.
Yes, sir. I'm doing fantastic. What was your reaction? What are the headlines saying about the consumer activity surrounding, everybody trying to get their Christmas presents and stuff?
Yeah, so based on what happened Friday, where we do have some numbers, and what happened yesterday, where, as you pointed out, we don't have numbers yet, we should have them shortly. This looks like it's going to be a bang-up Christmas season for retailers. So the record for the most sales in one day was last year's Cyber Monday was $7.8 billion. On Friday, Black Friday, the number came in at $7.4 billion. That's a record for a Black Friday, a little short of the record for a one-day sales. Yesterday, some of the early numbers I saw indicate that the sales will be over $9 billion. And I had one associate of mine saying it could approach $10 billion.
Wow.
So what that shows is the consumer is very confident. Consumer confidence is near a record high. It has slipped a little bit in the last couple months, but it's still near a record high. So with that kind of confidence and with the fact that wages are growing at the fastest rate in more than 20 years, and inflation remains relatively low. So when you get an increase in wages, it does increase your purchasing power because prices haven't gone up very much. So consumers are very confident. I think this Christmas selling season will be exceptionally strong, probably 4 to 5% higher than we did last year. And I think that momentum will carry forward into next year, and I'm looking for a better 2020 than we had in 2019.
Wow. That's really, really positive news. You know, I think that, I mean, I have seen some indications, Michael, or some of those reports talking about, you know, people still have not paid off some of the debt they incurred last year during the shopping. But, you know, to your point, consumer confidence, it seems like people are, you know, really happy with where things are. You know, I know the stock market took a little hit yesterday with some of that reporting, but all in all, what would you call this? What is this, Maganomics?
Well, actually, what President Trump did was really go back to what truly made America great. So the prior administration didn't concentrate on economic growth. As a result, from 2006 to 2016, economic growth only averaged about 2%, and that created all kinds of problems. So President Trump said, look, we have to get economic growth up. If you really want to help people in lower income, don't just give them things, which is the Democrats' view. Let's just give them free health care. We'll give them free college. We'll give them free even guaranteed income. Instead of just giving things, President Trump said, all I'm going to give everybody is opportunity. So I'm going to get the economy to grow, and he did that by reducing burdensome regulations, which he could do through executive order quickly. Then he got Congress to reduce taxes, passed in 2017. That gave more spendable income to the middle class. He also cut taxes for the upper classes, which created capital, which enabled expansion. So he just pretty much went back to what Ronald Reagan did in the 80s and even what Kennedy Johnson did in the early 60s, both of which accelerated economic growth. So he minimized regulations, eliminated the bad ones, cut taxes for people, and that created more spending. The economy grew, and now he's really helping the lower income people. If you look at some of the minority unemployment numbers for African Americans and Hispanics, they're at record lows. So he's really provided opportunity for growth, just doing what Kennedy Johnson did and what Reagan did back in the 80s, just cut taxes, reduce regulations, and set up an environment where people were able to succeed, and the economy is now growing, and things are a lot better.
To your point, Dr. Bussler, with minorities, we have some polling on President Trump's approval rating. So we had one a couple weeks ago, Rasmussen, showing a 34% among black voters, 34% favorable rating. Emerson University, 34.5% support from black voters. But recently, it was taken November 11th to the 15th, the NPR PBS and Marist poll found that Trump has a 33% approval rating of non-white voters, just anybody who is, not Caucasian. So, to your point, I think they probably approve because their economic circumstances have improved.
Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want to support the work we're doing right here at Conduit News, bringing you the truth, then why not consider giving less money to the government that never stops overspending and overtaxing us by giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce, the premier organization in Arkansas that never stops promoting small business and limited government. Just go to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Support Our Cause. From there, you can decide if you want to donate monthly or one time. Give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow and grow less, and give the people fighting for your values more. Conduitforcommerce.org.
And military tools, as well as propaganda, to advance its influence and benefit its interests in the United States.
And I have wanted to welcome back to Arkansas Chairman Chu. Please give Chairman Chu a round of applause.
China is also applying this power in more proactive ways than ever before to exert influence and interfere in the domestic policy and politics of this country.
Chairman Chu, I got to know as he is the CEO and chairman of Shandong Ruyi Technology Group out of Shandong Province.
Over the past 17 years, China's GDP has grown ninefold. It's become the second largest economy in the world. Much of this success was driven by American investment in China. And the Chinese Communist Party has also used an arsenal of policies inconsistent with free and fair trade, including tariffs, quotas, currency manipulation, forced technology transfer, intellectual property theft, and industrial subsidies that are handed out like candy to foreign investment.
We've been to Shandong Province a number of times since I've been governor. We've called on people, and Chairman Chu gave us the opportunity to meet with him at Ruyi, at their technology group there in Shandong, and saw his incredible facility. We asked him to visit Arkansas. He did. So Chairman Chu, we're delighted to have you here. I'm excited about signing this agreement with you, and I welcome you to Arkansas.
These policies have built Beijing's manufacturing base at the expense of its competitors, especially the United States of America.
And I wanted to recognize Chairman Lee to my right, who is the founder of
Exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Hey folks, you're listening to the best of Conduit News Radio with me, Paul Harrell.
So the first time that we told you about this book, this new book called Great Society, A New History by author Amity Schlaze, it wasn't available to purchase. It is now available to purchase. It came out November 26th. Everyone's doing their Christmas shopping. And so we wanted to have her back on to talk about this book. She's on the line right now. Amity, welcome back.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yes, I'm so glad that you could spend some time with us this morning. So we've talked about your other books. You're a New York Times bestselling author. You've written about The Forgotten Man. You've written about Calvin Coolidge. By the way, the Conduit founders have recently visited the Calvin Coolidge Center in Washington, D.C., and I guess it's the Coolidge House. And, Calvin Coolidge, his principles are like right down the line of what our principles are. And so your book about Calvin Coolidge is also an excellent read. So what can you tell us, Amity, about how this book so far is being received? Your new book, Great Society.
The current book is called Great Society, and this morning, the New York Times called it deeply flawed. So let's start with that.
Okay, the New York Times calls it deeply flawed. So what? That's got to be a good thing, actually. That probably means that it's completely 100% accurate.
Well, I'm friendly to the New York Times because they also excerpted the book. But that's an example. That is, they printed part of the book in their newspaper, and I'm very happy about that. And that part included, by the way, Wilbur Mills, at least in the first draft. So what it tells us is that the topic of the Great Society, this 1960s period when the government looked like it was supposed to do everything and that it would succeed, is controversial. And that is true. And what my book says is it was really nice for government to try to intervene, but most of what it did, threw a grenade or laid a time bomb for later. So the Great Society was not great. It was problematic, and therefore we shouldn't emulate it.
And so, and I know we've talked about before. Oftentimes, whatever the stated goal is, we're trying to tackle this problem, but you get negative results elsewhere, right? And so your book exposes that.
Well, that's right. I mean, Lyndon Johnson really wanted to do everything for poor people. He promised to cure poverty. He didn't say create a palliative. He said cure poverty. And we didn't cure poverty. In fact, poverty flattened out by our poverty data to about 1 in 10 families. And he thought he would end racial division by establishing what we know as affirmative action. Instead, that fostered racial division. It deepened the cracks between blacks and whites, which is sad. He thought that the federal government could make America better. Instead, he destroyed a good swath of old America, what you might call Tocqueville America, the America where communities took care of themselves. They didn't always do a perfect job, but often they did a better job than our history books allow. And imagine a great steamroller coming to your community, and we're kind of going to roll over, flatten what is in place in terms of local institutions or obviate them in order to introduce a federal office to save the people, which doesn't do that very well. So it was an important period, and we live. We think, Paul, that the New Deal of the 1930s shaped our modern life. That's not true to the extent that the Great Society of the 1960s shapes our modern life. Our spending on commitments we initiated in the Great Society is greater than our spending on commitments we initiated in the 1930s. I didn't know that, actually, but there's a chart in the back of the book that shows you when it happened, when those lines crisscrossed. So why, nowadays we talk about both parties. We talk about the importance of idealism and something different, and then here this book shows that idealism was painful. Even Medicare and Medicaid, which many people like, or extensions of Social Security, have comforted many of us in my generation. I'm turning 60, but we've left our children with a terrible debt because Medicare can't be paid for, and then after that, pretty soon Social Security goes into deficit, runs out of money as well, worse than deficit. So I was curious to find, Paul, the many parallels between the ambition and idealism of the early 60s and the ambition and idealism of our current period.
I'm very, very interested to hear about the fact that the new programs steamrolled the local ones. That to me is fascinating because it almost produces a current mentality where I've often speculated, has that made us less charitable than we used to be? Because a lot of times people are like, well, I pay taxes for that. Or it's kind of like the Ebenezer Scrooge line when he's asked for more money. Don't my taxes go to the workhouses and things like that? And so I wonder if that's also not a consequence from the Great Society?
Well, that I would say there were times, usually when you cut taxes. I mean, in history, we used to write. I used to work at the Wall Street Journal. And we write these editorials about how charitable giving did fine when taxes are reduced overall. In fact, it sometimes does better because people have more money and they begin to assume more responsibility for their community. When people are fleeced, they're not in a giving mood. I already gave at the office to the federal government through my withholding. So that's enough now. The 2017 Act reduced the, as far as I understand it, and I'm going off the topic of my book, but reduced the number of taxpayers who might claim a deduction for charitable giving, and even perhaps reduced the tax savings in some cases. So, we have some evidence now that charitable contributions took a hit in 2018. Charity is the first impulse. It's the best impulse. It's not just because, private giving is holy. It's because we tend to give charity at home. And when you give at home, you know what you're giving to. And therefore, you make more rational decisions. You look at two hospitals or two churches and you say, which serves the people better? Well, in my opinion, the one on this street does, and the one on that street, I have my doubts, so I'm going to go to Street A and give to that institution. That discretion, that judgment of the people is gone in a federal program written by people in Washington who happen to know, by the way, neither institution, neither church, neither hospital. To them, churches in the town are all like far away, and it depends how they fill out an application for a grant or support. Or it depends whether the federal government is introducing a new institution to obviate both those old, respected institutions. There's one example in my book I want to talk about. It's in St. Louis. In St. Louis, there was a very healthy community chest and charitable community. St. Louis is a German-American community, and you could feel it. You could feel the old kind of German way of taking care of one's own. And when the urban renewal came, which was even before the Great Society, urban renewal steamrollered the downtown, including, by the way, a lot of institutions, and built giant high-rise project homes for poor people. So they lost their tenement, which might not have a good bathroom, but which was where they had chosen to live, and were moved almost without, much say for themselves. Here's into these tall buildings, which are called Pruitt-Igoe. And the federal government helped to pay for that, and the city fathers of St. Louis went along because, hey, the federal government was helping to pay, and therefore they would not have to raise taxes. Lawmakers at home don't always like to do that. And this tall set of buildings, Pruitt-Igoe, were a disaster because they didn't suit families. They had weird setups. For example, the elevator didn't stop on every floor, so you had to go up and down stairs, and that's where the gangs beat you up. There wasn't much commerce, which has a civilizing effect. There was no little store on the basement level. There was not even a really good playground. There was just kind of a vast, isolating park, and it became a nest for crime, Pruitt-Igoe. And eventually, at the end of the book, I tell the story all the way through. Two things happened. One was a local church decided, Father Shockley was his name, one of the churches that happened to remain standing after the bulldozers began to move people out, Father Shockley, into homes of their own. That is, help them buy a home. Some federal money came for that, but it was mostly a local effort. Local banks, local companies started to move people into homes of their own, that they got ownership, and the people were very happy. What happened then? They had to blow up Pruitt-Igoe, all of it, because it was such a tragedy, a danger, and an embarrassment. So that one housing project, and I'm sure you have some in your area too, is the emblem of what happens when a government comes and tells everyone it's doing good, particularly a faraway government. The architect, his name was Yamasaki, was a nice man. But he had to deal with all the rules the federal government gave him about the housing, including density rules, including where the elevators go, as I mentioned, including. And later, he made a remarkably frank confession makes you like him. He said, "I wish I had never built it. I had never built this Pruitt-Igro complex," which was the largest public housing in America. I should mention that. Wow. So we wish we had never done it. That is what you hear over and over again about the projects of the 1960s. And we're not even talking here about welfare and families and, various projects specific to your region.
We're talking with Amity Schlaze, author of the new book, A Great Society, A New History. Alan Greenspan says, Great Society is accurate history that reads like a novel covering the high hopes and catastrophic missteps of our well-meaning leaders. Amity, you mentioned that the New York Times today said that it was flawed. What specifically are they referring to?
Well, they say America should probably be spending more than we spent in the 1960s.
Okay.
More, and well, I didn't quite get all the logic, but the author, Benjamin Applebaum, was critical basically because, gosh, I don't want to misrepresent him, but because he thought that I didn't offer the generous possibility. What I say in the book is, how would America have looked if we'd left businesses more free to grow and community institutions more free to grow rather than telling them how it's all supposed to go? It might have been better. That's what I write. He says, well, she doesn't ask, Amity doesn't ask, how would it have been if we had spent more? Well, if we had spent more, our economy wouldn't have grown. I think the real answer is we'd have fewer jobs now.
Yeah.
The Europe story is the story of how it would be if you spend more. And Europe had to draw back from its big social democratic spending. Europe unemployment is higher than our unemployment historically. And you see that, as the European social democracy grew and they continued the experiment that we didn't, their structural unemployment rose above ours. And that was a shock because for a long time it was lower because they were scrappy countries trying to recover from World War II and everybody worked.
You mentioned the family earlier. So what effect did the Great Society have on the family? Like, so versus then versus now?
What we're talking about is when the federal government or government policy affects the family. And it actually commenced this effect of the federal government, the negative effect, with welfare, which was originally a great New Deal program, right? So in the 30s, what welfare money went to the states and went to the individuals, and the states had a lot of say in what happened to welfare money, and they tended to want to give it to only single moms. If a dad is there, well, if you have a dad there, you don't deserve welfare money. So what welfare money did, and public housing made it worse, was encourage the moms who were poor to live alone in the public housing so they could get the welfare and maybe the housing benefit as well. So it created a huge marginal cost, to put it in economic terms, a huge marginal cost to staying together as a family, which is perverse. And there's also a film about Pruitt-Igro, which I recommend, where the people who lived there, who were children at the time, remember how they had to lie and pretend they had no dad, or the dads might even hide in the closet. And the children wondered, why is my mother lying? When you see your parent lie, time stops, and you say, why is this person who's so important to me, who I admire so much, lying? What fear would force a parent to lie? Because children know about parents' fear. And the answer was the mother needed the money. So this was continued, though they recognized the trouble of their episodic mentions, intermittent mentions by Kennedy, Johnson administration, and so on. They knew that they didn't want to hurt the family, but they effectively did. And, of course, this idea of illegitimate birth was part of that, and illegitimate birth only strengthened, both, by the way, at first among blacks, but also among whites. And we created the perpetual matriarchy, the perpetual dad-free family, and perpetual trouble with young men.
Gosh.
But I think our listeners know that already.
Yeah. Well, they
and I don't mean to offend anyone personally, but we perpetuated it through the great. A problem had already been there, we perpetuate it,
Well,
and strengthen and institutionalize and codify it.
Yeah, and to me, I think the Great Society, from my point of view, is really just a lot of socialistic tendencies. So, but now we have your book, your great book, and I think it, to me, is representing, evidence that socialism doesn't work. Do you agree with that?
Well, yes, the first sentence of the book is, why not socialism? Because that's part of the idealism, right? If you're a young person, you want to be logical, you want to go all the way. Why not socialism, Dad? Why not socialism, Mom? It sounds nice. I can't remember it doing anything bad. And this, in the book, it's a character who went to the federal government hoping to see the president, and getting in to talk to a rather high White House official, that was Sergeant Shriver, the poverty czar, with the idea, why not socialism? Sort of like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez today. It sounds nice. What's wrong with you government people? You're so corrupted and so compromising. How about a pure ideal? And what I show in the book is we didn't get communist socialism. These young socialists were, by and large, not traitors. They didn't report to Moscow. They were just wrong. And what we got was halfway socialism, sometimes known as social democracy, through the expansion of the federal government in the Great Society. And Nixon's in this too, by the way. And even halfway socialism, the evidence suggests, is too far. It's sort of like the discussion today. You say, well, I'm not wild about Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren because they like socialist ideas, and I don't, and I don't think they're good for my community. But heck, they might only get halfway. They might be, like that. And the truth is, halfway is indeed too far. So the halfway results of half socialism of the 60s give us some warnings. One example is guaranteed income. This is a very popular idea because giving people money sounds better than separating their families with perverse welfare rules. But giving people money, and the leader in that was Daniel Patrick Moynihan. You've heard that name before. He was not yet a senator, but he was a White House advisor to Richard Nixon. He said, let's give people money. Milton Friedman said that. What can be wrong with that? Well, what happens, he discovered when he tried to write the law, is at what point you stop giving the people money. Again, their marginal taxes go way up. They stop receiving. They start paying. It's the same problem as the earned income credit, and I know many of your listeners are familiar with that. So they're deterred from working more at, say, $30,000 a year or $20,000 a year, or in Moynihan's time, $10,000 a year, because they have to take a huge hit, and they lose their special housing or they lose their Medicaid, and therefore even paying people money, guaranteed income, has a perverse outcome.
Yeah, there's
just at a later point in the income scale.
Wow. The book, ladies
setting
and gentlemen.
Aside what,
no, go ahead.
Sorry,
no, go
sorry
ahead.
to rant a lot, but setting aside what it does to you morally, which is the more important question. What does it do to an 18-year-old to tell him he's entitled to money? What does that do to his own drive, his own conception of the world? And I want to add, that is more important, because what 18-year-olds need, or 16-year-olds, or 20-year-olds, is a sense that they're on their own. That helps them to try. One of the fascinating people I've met in my life is Harrell, the energy king of Oklahoma. Mr. Ham had to do everything for himself. He got married very young. He had trouble finishing high school, and he went to college, but he barely had time because he had to earn money because he was married and his family didn't have a lot of money. He came from a poor family. And that energized him, and he became Harold Ham. Continental Resources, right? A great big energy company, led the way in the energy revolution. I wonder what it would have been like if you had said to Harold, who's a smart man, here's $1,000 a month for you, and we'll pay for the college all the way, and we'll pay for the health care. Would he have had the energy to do something new? The same reason young men and women bust out, join the Army and Navy, even though their mother is quite concerned, is that need to show the world that one can support oneself, and that need is precious. So what do we do when we start these handout businesses? We undermine that need. We infantilize our children. We cause them to live in hotel parents the rest of their lives.
Wow.
We impair them. Sorry to be so bossy.
No. Amity, it's been a great time talking with you. Your book, again, Great Society, A New History. Amity Shalais, everybody. Amity, thank you so much for spending time with us this morning.
Oh, thank you.
Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want to support the work we're doing right here at Conduit News, bringing you the truth, then why not consider giving less money to the government that never stops overspending and overtaxing us by giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce, the premier organization in Arkansas that never stops promoting small business and limited government. Just go to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Support Our Cause. From there, you can decide if you want to donate monthly or one time. Give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow and grow less, and give the people fighting for your values more. Conduitforcommerce.org.
Sun Paper of Shandong Province in China. I also want to recognize Secretary Ma of Shandong Province.
As President Trump said just this week, in his words, we rebuilt China over the last 25 years.
Last November, as you know, I traveled to Shandong Province. I met with Chairman Li. I toured Sun Paper Company along with Mike Preston. While in China, we signed a letter of intent on behalf of the state of Arkansas with Sun Paper, indicating that Sun Paper wanted to put a major bioproducts mill in South.
Bob Maloney here with a developing story from ASA News The Parrot. China is coming to Arkansas. We go live to the press conference where the Communist Chinese executive is addressing Arkansans for the first time. Let's listen into the translator.
On behalf of the government of the People's Republic of China, we invite you to come and visit the newest named city in Arkansas, China, Delphia. We are very pleased to own an American city. Our communist government is proud to do business with the mediocre state of Arkansas. We are happy to take your money and your trees and send the profits back home. The Communist government of China was pleased to learn the taxpayers of Arkansas are excited to contribute their money with the hope, if you build it, one day jobs will come. We are excited to take your fields of capitalism and turn them into fields of communism, where every Arkansan has nightly dreams of Mao. China is looking forward to our investment of $1 billion in what is now called Arkansas. We see this as an investment in our future, and that future will be called New Beijing. Chinese investment will make Arkansas a great place for jobs, as the People's Republic of China will succeed where the Soviets failed. As we build our roots deep in Arkansas, we are thrilled with the potential new ideas and advancement we will share with our people back home. Soon we will have the world's largest runway in the South China Sea, and we thank Arkansas for contributing to our noble cause. In closing, once we make China great again, all of you will see the glory of the revolution of Mao. And Arkansas, whatever you do, please never call the FBI.
Paul Harrell, Parody.
Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want to support the work we're doing right here at Conduit News, bringing you the truth, then why not consider giving less money to the government that never stops overspending and overtaxing us by giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce, the premier organization in Arkansas that never stops promoting small business and limited government. Just go to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Support Our Cause. From there, you can decide if you want to donate monthly or one time. Give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow and grow less, and give the people fighting for your values more. Conduitforcommerce.org.
In Arkansas.
The Communist Party has set its sights on controlling 90% of the world's most advanced industries, including robotics, biotechnology, and artificial intelligence. To win the commanding heights of the 21st century economy, Beijing has directed its bureaucrats and businesses to obtain American intellectual property, the foundation of our economic leadership, by any means necessary.
Chairman Lee and I met yesterday. Chairman Lee indicated to me that Sun Paper has selected Arkadelphia in Clark County as the location of a $1 billion bioproducts mill.
Beijing now requires many American businesses to hand over their trade secrets as the cost of doing business in China. It also coordinates and sponsors the acquisition of American firms to gain ownership of their creations. Worst of all, Chinese security agencies have masterminded the wholesale theft of American technology, including cutting-edge military blueprints. And using that stolen technology, the Chinese Communist Party is turning plowshares into swords on a massive scale.
Well, thank you all for joining us via Skype from Beijing this morning. Here in Beijing, it is 10 p.m. in the evening. I've had a very successful trip to China.
China now spends as much on its military as the rest of Asia combined. And Beijing has prioritized capabilities to erode America's military advantages on land, at sea, in the air, and in space.
I've spoken at Tsinghua University here in Beijing, which was a treat for me to speak with young Chinese students about Arkansas, and also to talk about the relationship between China and the United States.
China wants nothing less than to push the United States of America from the Western Pacific and attempt to prevent us from coming to the aid of our allies. But they will fail. Beijing is also using its power like never before. Chinese ships routinely patrol around the Senkaku Islands, which are administered by Japan. And while China's leader stood in the Rose Garden at the White House in 2015 and said that his country had, and I quote, no intention to militarize the South China Sea. Today, Beijing has deployed advanced anti-ship and anti-air missiles atop an archipelago of military bases constructed on artificial islands. China's aggression was on display this week when a Chinese naval vessel came within 45 yards of the USS Decatur as it conducted freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea, forcing our ship to quickly maneuver to avoid collision. Despite such reckless harassment, the United States Navy will continue to fly, sail, and operate wherever international law allows and our national interests demand. We will not be intimidated, and we will not stand down.
And we'll be calling on multiple prospects in China, as well as continuing our relationship with Sun Paper in Shandong Province.
In recent years, China has taken a sharp U-turn toward control and oppression of its own people. Today, China has built an unparalleled surveillance state, and it's growing more expansive and intrusive.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Okay, folks, welcome back to the show. Thanks for starting the beginning of your day with us here, the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. I don't know if you guys caught Tucker Carlson last week. He had a guy by the name of Dr. Wayne Johnson on the program. Now, Dr. Johnson is wanting to be appointed as the next senator for Georgia because you've got, I think, Senator Isaacson is he's not going to continue in that office anymore because of health problems. And Dr. Wayne Johnson joins us now on the phone. Dr. Johnson, how are you, sir?
I'm fine, Paul. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Now, I want to talk about your candidacy for the U.S. Senate in Georgia here in just a minute. But I caught that segment on Tucker Carlson, and let me just tell you, I think your ideas are really unique, and this student loan crisis is something that we definitely need to discuss. Now, I want to remind our listeners that from 2017 to 2019, you were a senior official in President Trump's administration. You're serving as the Chief Strategy and Transformation Officer and Chief Operating Officer for the Department of Education's Office of Federal Student Aid. So you have a unique perspective. What needs to change about the federal student loan program?
Well, the basic thing that needs to change is we need to, the federal government needs to stop making loans for people to go to school. The program has gotten unbelievably out of hand. Over the past 10 years, we've added well over $1 trillion to the amount of debt burden that's on people's backs, and it's because the loan program that the federal government has in place makes it extraordinarily easy for schools to convince students to take down high levels of debt burden in order to go to school there. So we got to stop making loans. But if we're going to stop making loans, we do need to put forth some type of a grant program that will allow people to at least get through an undergraduate degree. But that's the answer: is stop making the loans.
Stop making the loans. So the incentive structure is all it's reversed, right? I mean, these schools, these colleges, universities, they have no incentive to control their costs because they have what is essentially the government guaranteeing customers for them, right?
It's exactly correct. And Tucker Carlson picked that up in some of his earlier segments. He had pointed to that. I think what I helped him to appreciate was a little bit of, well, added some clarity in terms of exactly how the mechanics are working. But the federal government will make loans to people up to an unlimited level based upon what a college says is their cost to attend. So there's no control or constraint on the colleges and universities to keep them from continuing to raise their prices because they know that there's an ever-ending flow of money coming from the government in that regard.
So I've got this. I've got an op-ed that I found. Again, we're talking with Dr. Wayne Johnson. He's a candidate for U.S. Senate out of Georgia. Paragraph 2, the solution to relieving the personal financial burden of student loan debt is for the United States Congress to enact law that would fully cancel federal student loan debt. Moreover, to be equitable, people who did pay their student loan debt should be given credit for having done so. And there would be also a path forward so that post-high school education, whether vocational or traditional college, can be pursued on a basis that is debt-free. So,
Right.
I read that, and I wanted to just ask, so is your idea free second or higher education? Is that what you think needs to happen?
Well, first of all, I'm a Republican, and people keep asking me, why is a Republican setting forth such a bold, comprehensive, and I like to think decisive plan? And the answer is because we do have a social good that we've got to put in place in order to help people get through a certain level of post-high school education. And so when I started thinking this thing through, and again, 2.5 years front and center working at the Department of Ed, getting a doctorate in the subject before, and 35 years in consumer finance, mostly in the credit card space, I think I have a unique perspective on the responsibilities associated with, debt incurrence. But the specifics of what I'm advocating, and it is I'm a very physically conservative approach, but the first part of it is going forward, there needs to be a certain amount of money that's allocated to somebody to attend post-high school education, and that can be job and skills training as well as academic pursuit. But that needs to have a defined limit. It needs to be, this is as much we're going to make available and no more. And that's basically contrasting against today's current environment of, ever increasing amount of unlimited funding. With regard to, once you make that decision of what's a go-forward amount, then you come back into and look at your current file. And our current file has 44 million customers, 37 million of which have student loan debt of less than $50,000. So if you're going to give $50,000 going forward, which is what my plan advocates for, then you do $50,000 worth of relief of people on the books, and that'll take care of 37 million people, and a large number of people from state of Arkansas. And in the case of Georgia, it would relieve the debt on 1.7 million people, about $53 billion. So we're talking about serious money here. But then you got to really take a look at the 2/3 of the people that never pursued any type of education post-high school, and they should have the ability to tap into that, and I'm looking at a 10-year look back on that process. And then you got people that paid for it themselves. And, a lot of folks say, well, the socialistic aspect of relieving all this debt and going forward, what about me? I paid for it on my own. And quite frankly, those folks need to be given tax credits equal to an amount up to $50,000. So the equity for everybody is basically one of the cornerstones and driving elements of my plan.
So do you see this plan as correcting a problem that the government has really caused here? I mean, I know people voluntarily, when you're 18 years old, okay, you're going into debt. But at 18 years old, you're just ready to get to college. You're not really thinking 4 years ahead. And again, that's still your personal responsibility, a lot of people would say. But has the government caused this problem?
The answer is absolutely. The institutions of trust, the universities and the government, the two major institutions that the people are taught to trust, have breached that trust. And, whether it's an 18 or 20-year-old or even a 40 or 45-year-old racking up to school and saying, hey, I'd like to advance myself, the way in which the system presents itself is, hey, this is the way it's customarily done. This is, quote, even a best practice, which is something that sends a chill down my spine, that's being advanced to the student. You're going to get whatever, the state's going to give you or whatever the school's going to give you. But mostly the schools, what they're giving up for the most part is false discounting. And then, oh, by the way, here's an award letter, and baked into this award letter is this financial aid coming from the federal government. And they fail to tell you that aid actually is manifested by some very unorthodox loan instruments. And then they say, oh, by the way, don't sweat it, because at the end of the day, you're going to be caught up in you're going to be able to pay for it through an income-based repayment plan. And then they forgot to tell you that, oh, by the way, that's going to create negative amortization. And so the $20,000 you take down is actually going to wind up, after forbearances and deferments and all these other really bizarre, schemes that are in place by the government, is going to grow to $120,000 or $150,000. So, yes, the government, what started off with good intentions, which is a straightforward loan program that somebody would pay up after 10 years, that would have a fixed amount of loan money available, with a couple of twists and turns under the previous administration, basically boiled down to this very convoluted set of 30 different repayment plans. And nobody, I've got a doctorate in the subject. Believe me, it's hard for me to understand this stuff. And at the end of the day, the students are basically, saying, well, this is the school, I trust them. The government, I trust them, or they wouldn't make this thing available to me. And consequently, they wake up and say, wait a minute, how did I get ambushed along the way to this higher ed pursuit? And it really becomes problematic for people that start but never finish.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? It definitely does. I've heard about that phenomenon many, many times. So if the government caused the problem, I can definitely see how we would say that there's a lot of people out there who are victims of this.
Well, victims is, that's a term that has some legal connotations. But listen, but let me say this: the government caused the problem, and the government was certainly highly complicit in the problem. And it's, there's been some. There was an author that wrote a book called Indebtedness, which I found pretty profound, because what she basically said was that there's a student debt complex that's a combination of the government doing its activities and the schools doing their activities, and then of course you've got people that feed around the fringes of this, which can be very servicing organizations. So there's a whole complex at play to perpetuate this, and an astounding number is 80% of all the cash going into the higher education system in the United States is coming from the federal government. And so when you got that much, of the economic driver coming from one source, you got what you got. But the bottom line is this will only get fixed. We were endeavoring to fix it operationally. Tremendous strides forward. Secretary DeVos, fully supportive of that. The President's administration, fully supportive of that. Amazing things. But I woke up and said, what we're doing is just making this machine that's causing these problems run much more efficiently. And what we got to do is we got to, basically turn to Congress. And in my opinion, the Senate's where this has got to be driven from in order to make these changes that are necessary to the law.
We're talking with Dr. Wayne Johnson. He's a candidate for U.S. Senate out of Georgia. Now, can you tell me a little bit about the political process here? Right, I understand. I did a little research. You're wanting the governor of Georgia, Governor Kemp, there to appoint you to this Senate vacancy at this point, right?
Yeah, Governor Kemp actually put forth a very transparent application process where he allowed for people that are not normally out of the political realm to set themselves forward as someone that he could appoint to replace Johnny Isakson at the end of the year. He's got over 500 applicants for that. He's now in his decision process of appointment. Presented myself. Hopefully, he'll decide that I'm the right person to go into the Senate so that I could hit the ground running in January and start making these changes that would be good for the state of Georgia. But in order to make them good for the state of Georgia, you got to actually make them good for the entire country.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, I want to tell everybody about your website. Your website, if you want to check this out, folks, is johnsonsenate.com. That's johnsonsenate.com, and you can find out more. You can also see his interview there from Tucker Carlson. The last thing I want to talk about, and I know this is kind of backtracking a little bit, sir, but in this op-ed, I also see that when a student takes this money and goes into debt, this is also affecting their credit score, isn't it? So it's going to make it harder for them to buy a house or to get a car or something like that, right?
Well, it does, and it actually manifests in two ways. Even if somebody is performing as agreed, and one of the other interesting pieces of information is only 25% of the people are actually paying down interest and principal each month. So even if you make your payment, your outstanding loan balance is growing. So what's interesting is on your credit bureau report, your loan balance would be continuing to show that it's growing month over month, which when you do go through all this, the credit scoring calculations, that flags up some stuff. But then also a large number of people miss their initial payments because they just did not know they owed the money. I mean, that situation where they show up and sign a 10-year master promissory note without having any understanding of the amounts of money owing or the interest rates, people either don't complete school or they do complete school, but they actually do not know how much money they owe or where to make a payment. So that starts showing up as as missed payments. And so while the accuracy of the fact that the payment was missed is going into the report, the fact that the people didn't even know they owed the money is an unfair element of reporting. So people's credit reports are getting severely impaired because of the federal student loan reporting of credit bureau information.
So, and for real this time, this is my last question. What happens if we do nothing? What is there a crisis and is this bubble going to pop? What happens?
Well, what's interesting is this is not a bubble that will ever pop because the way it's funded. The government borrows money through the Treasury. They put the money out. The money flows, into the schools, and then individuals are taking on, their fractional piecemeal of the indebtedness obligation, and then so instead of it being a big bang, like the financial meltdown was, with regard to the mortgage crisis, this will be lots of very significant issues that relates to individual families. And so this is one of those situations. It's in my opinion, it's an abomination that's there. Everybody's aware of it, but because there's not a big bang associated with it, and a quote gigantic resolution effort, it'll just continue to erode the fabric of America. So if we don't do anything, just more and more people are going to get into more and more debt. The schools will continue to raise prices because they have no check on it, and we'll be talking about this a few years from now. Instead of being 1.6 trillion, it'll be 3 trillion, and I can even see the day when it'll be 5 trillion.
Wow.
And so what's happening is the reality is that people are not getting married because they don't want to take on each other's indebtedness obligation. People are, if they're also not having children, they're not buying homes. We could just go on and on in terms of what would continue to erode, and it's a level of basically student loan debt depression, not too dissimilar to what happened earlier in our century. But the net of it is we have this opportunity at this point in time to make a decisive course correction where we can say, yes, higher education or post-high school education is important. We're going to make an allocation towards that. We're going to reform the finance system. And, oh, by the way, to make things right, because the government did create this problem. When the government does things right, they get it really right. When the government does things wrong, they can get it really wrong because of the scale that we're dealing with. One of the interesting things, if you look at the macroeconomic effects of student loan debt cancellation, and there's a couple of reports out there. One was put out by the Levi Institute, and it's entitled "The Macroeconomic Effects of Student Loan Debt Cancellation." It's incredibly powerful what those economic models show in terms of the positive effect on the economy, household formation, and what have you. So I would look at this solution to this problem also being a great stepping stone to a very significant economic stimulation.
It's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating that the student loan program, what I just kind of heard you say there, the student loan program in some cases is actually hurting the American family, the idea of having kids and that sort of thing. And that would be the complete opposite of what it was claiming to do originally. You know what I mean? Which is to help
Exactly.
you. Yeah, that's incredible. Dr. Wayne Johnson, good luck to you, sir. I appreciate your big ideas, and I really appreciate you spending time with us this morning and educating my audience.
Well, I appreciate you. I've had an opportunity since y'all contacted me to go back and look at a lot of y'all's segments. Y'all do some really important, powerful things. So it was an honor to be on your program.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Love to do it again sometime. Have a happy Thanksgiving. Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want to support the work we're doing right here at Conduit News, bringing you the truth, then why not consider giving less money to the government that never stops overspending and overtaxing us by giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce, the premier organization in Arkansas that never stops promoting small business and limited government. Just go to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Support Our Cause. From there, you can decide if you want to donate monthly or one time. Give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow and grow less, and give the people fighting for your values more. Conduitforcommerce.org.
Often with the help of U.S. technology. And when it comes to religious freedom, a new wave of persecution.
In a world full of
is crashing
constituents
down
with
on
social
Chinese
media
Christians and
accounts,
Buddhists.
bloggers just looking to increase their page views, and a talk radio host who generally is just the worst, how are Little Rock's elite supposed to conduct business with such a lack of privacy? Introducing the 1835 Club, older and more refined than other clubs that claim discretion. The 1835 Club is for seasoned political veterans that want to conduct the highest form of aristocratic business with the public's money. Are you a schemer? Do you someday want a guaranteed flow of taxpayer money to support your business? Is it your dream to see the .gov domain at the end of your business website? Don't listen to the imitators. The 1835 Club is the place where corrupt politicians and businessmen hatch their next crony schemes. At the 1835 Club, we make lobbying safe and legal. Ethics. Why, of course. All business is done in an ethical manner. Just look for the sign above the door that reads, loophole. Are you tired of the Capitol Police restricting your access to the roof after a perfectly good night of drinking? The 1835 Club has libations and a perfectly good roof. Other crony clubs that promise discretion try to lure you in by advertising bars made out of aeroplanes. Well, at the 1835 Club, instead of an airplane fuselage, we've got a space shuttle. No, not a bar. We've got an actual space shuttle that makes a daily run to the moon so members of the 1835 Club can have some real privacy away from the bloggers and taxpayers. Are you an Arkansas aristocrat? Do you want to be? It's the 1835 Club, and we work tirelessly to make sure the good old boy system remains alive and well. Join today.
Disclaimer. The 1835 Club reserves the right to deny membership to anyone who has principles. Any talk of the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution must be done in jest or, at the very least, with a condescending tone. And finally, the 1835 Club will be given a 25% commission of any agreements made between politicians and the business community.
PHP Parody.
Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want to support the work we're doing right here at Conduit News, bringing you the truth, then why not consider giving less money to the government that never stops overspending and overtaxing us by giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce, the premier organization in Arkansas that never stops promoting small business and limited government. Just go to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Support Our Cause. From there, you can decide if you want to donate monthly or one time. Give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow and grow less, and give the people fighting for your values more. Conduitforcommerce.org.
And Muslims. Last month, Beijing shut down one of China's largest underground churches. Across the country, authorities are tearing down crosses, burning Bibles, and imprisoning believers. And Beijing has now reached a deal with the Vatican that gives the avowedly atheist Communist Party a direct role in appointing Catholic bishops. For China's Christians, these are desperate times.
So, do you like him as a candidate?
I think he's brought a lot to the table. It's not my message. I worry about the party in terms of expanding our base and what the message does to our recruitment of Hispanics, outreach to minorities. And so you've got to worry about the fall election and whether this is a message that's going to carry in Michigan, Ohio, and Florida, and those states that we need to carry.
The American people deserve to know. In response to the strong stand that President Trump has taken, Beijing is pursuing a comprehensive and coordinated campaign to undermine support for the president, our agenda, and our nation's most cherished ideals.
I think you've got to listen to what he says and how he conducts himself. And I don't know that he would be that different from what he is now in negotiating with Vladimir Putin. So,
you think that's a good thing or a bad thing?
No, I don't think it's a good thing. We need people who, in the presidency, that understand how the world works, understands that there's a time for bluster and there's a time for reason.
The Chinese Communist Party is rewarding or coercing American businesses, movie studios, universities, think tanks, scholars, journalists, and local, state, and federal officials.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
Hey folks, you're listening to the best of Conduit News Radio with me, Paul Harrell.
J.B. Deakins.
You know, when we look over this budget process, I don't know that I'm proud here tonight, sitting here with this final product. The process was a circus, to say the least. I completely agree with my colleagues that our employees are the most important asset that we have in this county. If we want to prioritize those raises, though, we should have done it at the front end of this budget. We have a spending problem in this county, and I want the public to understand that. It is out of control. There's no victory to say we have $4 million in reserves and we're now going to dip it below that. I'm going to commit myself to the budget that we all worked on and that we all approved in committee. It's very important for us to stick to some discipline in this fiscal process. Thank you very much.
All right. That
J.B. Johnson.
was last week. That's Washington County Justice of the Peace Patrick Deakins. And he joins us now on the phone. Patrick, how are you this morning?
I'm good, Paul. How about yourself?
I'm doing fantastic. Hey, that was I appreciate your passion. What's going on with the budgeting process in the Washington County Quorum Court?
Well, we just passed our budget last week, and that was some of the commentary that I had before we took the vote. Unfortunately, what has been too much of a process for Washington County and too much of now a ongoing thing is at the 11th hour they're throwing a bunch of spending and pork into that budget. In particular, last week it was moving a countywide raise for all the employees from 2% to 3%, which was not in the original budget that we passed out of committee. And so, what's disappointing is we try to be very deliberative in the things that we do in that budget, and then it gets tossed up to the quorum court, and all of a sudden all these other things get hung on it, and now of course the budget and the spending just grows. So the theme of Washington County continues to be spending. So
one of the clips that I also heard, we don't have this one queued up, but you said one more thing that I thought was really powerful. When you closed, expressing your disagreement with what was going on, you pointed to the audience and you reflected on the time that, when you were not on this quorum court, you were in the audience. Can you kind of tell us what you said again?
Yeah, so, this is my first term. To remind your listeners, this is my first year, basically rookie year of being a JP. And last year, right around this time, I sat out in the gallery with the public and watched the court do its work. At that time, there was a great concern about the amount of reserves that we have, and essentially that's just the savings account for the county to cover emergencies and things that we need to do, capital improvements and stuff like that. Well, last year they raised our property taxes, and the commentary at that time was, they kind of promised the people that tax increase, they were going to be responsible with it and fund the reserve. And unfortunately, that was completely untrue. They've spent every dime of that. We've contributed to that this year. So there is no more, we continue to deplete the reserve in Washington County. And my main objective when I said that, I want the people to understand this game that gets played. And because I feel like it's not this year, next year it's going to come up again to where it's going to be the same tune, different dance. They're going to say, hey, we need to fund a reserve and we want to raise your property taxes. Please cooperate with us and entrust us to do that. And I want everybody to remember that trust has already been violated. I don't want everybody to keep falling for this same mistake over and over and over again.
We're talking with Patrick Deakins. He's a Washington County Justice of the Peace. Definitely conservative. Matter of fact, Greg Harton has this great piece where he definitely said that you are on the right, on the conservative side of things, but he highlights this Washington County jail problem, and he highlights the fact that you are finding common ground with a pastor. Now, am I pronouncing this last name right? Schneckloth. Is that his last name?
Yes. Paul, this has been probably one of the most frustrating, but also one of the most rewarding issues I've dealt with on the court. It's kind of really hung over this whole term of just what we're doing with this jail issue and the overcrowding that we're experiencing and stuff. But what's really been inspiring to me is, and I think this happens on the national level, on the state level, and the local level, because I'm experiencing it, is it's taking people that have traditionally been pigeonholed into conservative or Republican and or Democrat and liberal, and we are attacking this issue from different points of view and from different angles. But I think what's really interesting is some of the solutions that we're seeing are common ground between us. And so it's been really good to see that there's problems that we can all address together and work together. It's not, like I'm saying, it's not Republican versus Democrat or liberal versus conservative. This is neighbors working with neighbors to try to solve this issue. And so that's been really rewarding from that standpoint.
Yeah, so he writes, I think it's safe to say Deakins approaches things from a conservative point of view. Conversely, Pastor Clint Schneckloth perspective is further left. They say, though, they have found common ground in searching for ways to reduce demand on the jail Washington County now operates. So tell us about the issue itself. Like, what are some of the ideas? Because I know, we've talked before, there seems to be this temptation to want to raise taxes to build a new jail.
Yeah. There is a hard push for that, and the people who are on the opposing side for me are really trying to twist our arm and say, hey, you've got to go ahead and build this jail. It's got to be done. We're losing time, essentially. And my whole position is, we would be funding a system, in my mind, that has great underlying issues. So, of course, if we build a jail, but our justice system has underlying issues that's adding to our inmate population, we're going to, of course, fill it up. And then instead of having a 750-bed problem, which is the problem we have now at our current size, we're going to have a 1,400-bed problem when we double it a few years down the road. So my idea, my push is let's treat some of these underlying causes. I've talked to a lot of concerned people, and I've also talked to a lot of people that are involved in the criminal justice system. And just for example, one of the main things we know is people with mental health issues and or drug addiction issues are a great burden on our jail system. And we also have seen through countless studies that throwing those people in jail and housing them, one, it's not responsible from a general health population for your general health system from your population's standpoint, but also fiscally, it doesn't make any sense, because what eventually happens is the recidivism rate when these people return to jail over and over again is very high. And so what happens is we just kind of get in this vicious circle of arrest, detention, arrest, detention, arrest, detention, where maybe if we spent our time and money in other places, we could break that cycle of arrest and detention through maybe some programs about addiction, or maybe getting that person with mental health issues into the right treatment environment instead of just throwing them in that county jail and in that environment that perpetuates whatever symptoms they might have.
I completely agree with that. That notion 100%. And, you know, I definitely know that as far as the drug addiction thing, that problem, I mean, that's something that has been skyrocketing all across the nation. A lot of it has to do with the fact that you have the regulatory crackdowns on opioids. So people are trying to get their fix somewhere else. That's why a lot of people are going back to heroin, needle sharing. I've been told by somebody that knows, that I trust, that's one of the reasons in my neck of the woods up over here in Northeast Arkansas, we had such a hepatitis outbreak, because it was actually sharing of needles. And that's what actually led to that. So, there's a lot of other underlying factors to all of this. Now, this article talks about an older jail. What can you tell us about an older jail, the older space?
Yeah, before Washington County constructed and built its new jail, which I think was completed around 2005 and 2006, they had an older jail down on College Avenue, which was about a 240-bed facility. When Washington County completed their new jail, they moved out of that particular space, and at the time I don't believe there was much of a need for it for the county, so what they did was they leased that to the state for $1 a year. And so the state now uses that as what I understand is a women's detention facility to hold some women prisoners. And so, I had our county attorney pull that lease, and we looked at it, and the opportunity for Washington County now is that we could reclaim that building with 9 months notice. That's all in the terms of the lease. And so that might give us at least some short-term or some possibility to do some other things with our inmate population as an alternative to building a double expansion onto our jail. So that's pretty exciting news for me. I'm going to continue to vet that out. But more broadly, I think this speaks to, there's been a great degradation of the partnership between the county and the state, and this jail issue really highlights that, Paul. The state's really neglecting their responsibility to both fund the inmates that we house for the state at the full rate, and then also it's the state's responsibility to fund prosecutors and public defenders that work in the judicial system and get these cases adjudicated and get them out of the way, and they're not adequately funding either of those things for Washington County. So, I talk to people a lot, and they say, well, the state has no appetite to help us out in the northwest part of the state. Little Rock's not going to help out the northwest counties, Benton or Washington, because they just view those as having, a lot more opportunities, et cetera, et cetera. Well, anybody thinks of that. But, so we're really getting a cold shoulder in that sense. But when we talk about going down and reclaiming this lease, all of a sudden the state wants to tout the partnership that we have and how we need to work together and stuff like that. So, we'll see how that goes. It's a seed of an idea right now, but I'm really heavily wanting to pursue this and see if that can't be a solution for Washington County.
Wow. Well, yeah, anything but tax increase, and is, I think that's a healthy mentality, and that's what that's the responsibility I know that you have to your constituents, because that's what you told them you do, and you're doing just that. Looking at other options other than the normal. I mean, government's asking for tax increases is just the normal way things work, and it shouldn't be normal. That should be the exception, not the rule.
Absolutely. We see that is the normal thing, and that's the automatic reaction anytime especially Washington County faces a problem is, well, how do we go to the taxpayer and get this funded? How do we go to the taxpayer and fix this? And my whole deal is, let's be responsible with the money that we do have. I don't understand the concept of just continuing to go to the taxpayer. At some point in my mind, the taxation well runs dry, but that is not the mentality that people have. And to connect the two issues, the fact that we continue to spend outside of our bounds in the budget process, and we continue to live above our means from what the taxpayers have given us, is a great testament to me of why we can't continue to go to the taxpayers and have them fund jails and things like that. It's unfortunate that we get into this situation, and I just want people to be aware of it and get involved, because the automatic reaction is to come to them for the taxes. So,
yeah. Well, Patrick Deakins, we appreciate it, sir. It's always great to talk to you.
Thank you, Paul. Everybody be good and have a happy Thanksgiving.
Yes, sir. Happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy your time. Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want to support the work we're doing right here at Conduit News, bringing you the truth, then why not consider giving less money to the government that never stops overspending and overtaxing us by giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce, the premier organization in Arkansas that never stops promoting small business and limited government. Just go to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Support Our Cause. From there, you can decide if you want to donate monthly or one time. Give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow and grow less, and give the people fighting for your values more. Conduitforcommerce.org.
And then, Chairman, you'll look out in the audience and you'll see multiple members of the governor's cabinet. We're also here to support you. You'll see multiple members of the state legislative assembly. They're here to support you, and specifically Senator Caldwell, Senator Ingram, Representative Murdoch, Representative Hollowell. These are your senators and your representatives now. You call on them and they're going to help you, guarantee it. And Senator English, I saw you out there too. Thank you for being here as well.
As we speak, Beijing is employing a whole-of-government approach, using political, economic, and military tools as well as propaganda to advance its influence and benefit its interests in the United States.
Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want to support the work we're doing right here at Conduit News,
money, power, prestige, essence. Available now from aristocrats serving Arkansas. From Zenata Rhino Collection. The fragrance of backroom deals. Nepotism. The aroma of higher taxes. Subliminal deception. Deep state. Ace. Made right here in Arkansas by a taxpayer-funded Chinese factory. Every bottle carefully crafted for you. Gender neutral. Nothing Patron says aristocrat, like essence of bureaucrat. Essence of Bureaucrat by Asa.
Available now in the Marble Palace gift shop.
Paul Harrell parody. Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Hey folks, you're listening to the best of Conduit News Radio with me, Paul Harrell.
I want to go now to geologist Gregory Wrightstone, author of Inconvenient Facts the Science Al Gore Doesn't Want You to Know. Gregory, how was your Thanksgiving, sir?
Oh, really good. Really good. Got to be with the family and enjoyed a couple of them. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. I'm very energized moving forward throughout the rest of the month. We were just talking a little bit about this. We're playing an old clip from Michael Bloomberg back in 2018 talking about banning sugary sodas. But, he's running for president, and I figure, Gregory, first of all, what do you think about it? And two, how committed is Michael Bloomberg to this climate change nonsense?
Well, he's been a long time proponent of this catastrophic man-made warming, and in fact, he's been the head of an international group called the Task Force on Climate Change. It's an international group, Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. So he's been at the forefront of this for a number of years. I don't agree with it, and what he wants to do with this thing is identify financial disclosure statements for companies on what they've invested in, for organizations, for various funds. Are they investing in fossil fuels or not? But I think a lot of people can see, including your listeners, can see right through this, because I think it's becoming really clear to any clear-thinking, rational, sane, I could probably add some more adjectives, individuals, that we're just not going to be able to get away from fossil fuels. He wants to go to a zero carbon footprint by 2050 or sooner, and it's just not going to happen with wind and solar. These things have a 20, maybe 30-year at the max lifespan for each one of these before they need replaced. It's a massive investment that's going to cost taxpayers, including every single one of your listeners, just huge amounts of money. It's estimated the Green New Deal by itself will cost $100 trillion over the first 10 years. And bear in mind, the federal budget is around $4 trillion, and they want to spend $100 trillion. So it's crazy talk what they're doing.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And one of the clips that we were just playing, he talked about coal and how, it doesn't matter if the person loses their job because this is about life and death, and we need to choose life over that job, and they can, find something else to do. But my goodness, I look at my energy bills now, and I like heating my home with natural gas or electricity or whatever. And sometimes it can get pretty pricey as it is now. I don't think we could tolerate any more increase in energy prices.
Yeah, and if we just look, let's just take a look at Arkansas. If Arkansas reduced 100% of its CO2 emissions, the resultant change, and this is using their own numbers, and I've got this up at my website, you can go look for yourself. If we reduce 100%, it would be 0.0009. So that's, I can't even say, it's less than 1/1000th of a degree Fahrenheit by the year 2050. That's the change that this would make. Less than 1/1000th of a degree Fahrenheit by 2050. And it's well below anything we can measure. And that's if we reduced 100%. And if we look at the United States, if the United States reduced its emissions 100%, we would avert 0.07 of a degree Fahrenheit by 2050. Well, it's so small, again, it can't even be measured. And this is what we're talking about. What they want to do with Michael Bloomberg and the others, they want to reduce carbon dioxide emissions, and they think that will change the temperature of the Earth. And even using their own statistics, it would be so slight as to be unmeasurable and closer to zero than anything that you could measure. And if we also look, the United States has reduced its CO2 emissions by 14% in the last 10 years. It's estimated that the increase from China alone, it completely blew that away in 45 days. So 45 days of increased CO2 emissions from China from coal-fired plants in 45 days has completely usurped and overwhelmed that 14% reduction we've seen. In other words, it completely wiped that out. And this is what China keeps doing. They keep increasing coal production, and they're not about to stop. Their coal and cheap electricity is going to drive their economy, and that's what they believe. They're paying lip service to things like the Paris Climate Accords, all the while thumbing their nose or maybe raising their middle finger to the Paris Climate Accords.
Yeah, that's what China does. I mean, you can make an agreement. That's why if we ever do get a trade deal with them, we have no guarantee that they're going to go by it. You can't really trust the communist Chinese. And this is news to some people, but I don't think it's news to you, Gregory.
No, and India is in. I put India in a different category because they have. Well, I think it's at 1.3 billion, 1.4 billion people, somewhere around there. Don't hold me to the exact tenths of a billion, but there's 600 million of those people are living in destitute, generational poverty. And Prime Minister Modi wants to lift those people up and he wants to do it. He's been pretty clear. He says we need to provide low-cost, abundant, reliable energy to the people of India in order to lift them up out of this generational poverty. And what he wants to do, too, they have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that are living in India cooking over open wood, dried dung. There's an estimated 4 million people dying early death. A lot of those are women. They're cooking inside because they don't have access to fossil fuels to cook over. And those are 4 million deaths that could be easily averted by providing things like compressed natural gas, electric, propane, things like that. And I was just looking at a picture here, a woman in Nepal that had just had cataract surgery. Cataracts are rampant among these people that cook over, indoor cooking over dried dung and wood. Early death, she was 42 years old with cataracts, nearly blinded. And these are the things that AOC and Bloomberg, they don't understand the consequences of what they're proposing, the negative consequences on the poorest among us around the earth. And I'm not just talking, it's here in America, we don't have so much of this, but there are billions of people around the earth that are living in horrible poverty situations that could benefit greatly from low cost or reliable, abundant energy that we can get from fossil fuels.
Yeah, when you think about those numbers and you think about how much this technology that we take for granted, heating our homes, the energy that we have access to, how it would so help these other countries. And you have deaths that are happening now, and the left wants us to think about what might happen, in 9 years, 13 years, or in 2050 or wherever. And it's ridiculous. They're claiming that if we implement socialism, essentially, that we can control the weather. It's crazy.